This session is over proposal development and submission, and we'll be covering the pre-award activities and research development activities, federal sponsors, common proposal components, routing and approval, and then, of course, some of the electronic systems used to submit those proposals. As you know, the executive departments that fall under the executive branch are many. We have two slides. Some of those that you're probably familiar with are USDA, DOD, DHHS, and you can switch to the next one, John. DOJ, HUD, Department of Veteran Affairs. Some of those are the ones that we're going to see a lot of proposals come from. We're going to start with USDA, which is one that I'm all too familiar with. So USDA provides much of the leadership on food, agriculture, and natural resources. The Department of Ag is made up of 29 agencies, and most of you that submit USDA are going to be familiar with ARS, AMS, NEFA. As you know, that one released a week or so ago, FSIS, etc. AFRI, are you still? Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong screen, John. I'm so sorry. So AFRI is going to be the program for competitive grants, and then your non-AFRI competitive grants. USDA also has those, or NEFA does, and then there's your capacity grants as well. To be eligible for a capacity grant, it's limited to institutions, which are going to be your 1862, 1890, and 1994 land grants. I would encourage you to, there's a lot of information on USDA, and of course, none of us know what questions are going to be on there, but I would say, okay, just a couple of things that aren't on the slides, but that I would recommend remembering and studying for USDA is they're limited if it's an AFRI or their typical grant opportunities. Your IDC is going to be limited to 30% of TFFA, total federal funds, or your rate, whichever is less. For those of you who are familiar with AMS and ARS, those typically are going to come in the form of unsolicited cooperative agreements. Most of the ARS ones are going to be limited to no IDC or 10%. Most of the ones that I submit are no IDC. They do have a cost share component of 20%. And of that 20%, half of it has to be in direct cost, and then the other half can be in indirect cost and unrecovered indirect cost. They also do not allow tuition. So those are just some things to keep in mind. I don't know if they'll be on the test, but those are some things I was trying to think that you could be asked over USDA. So Department of Commerce is our next one. Under the Department of Commerce, you're going to have the National Institute of Standards and Technology. You're going to have NOAA, and then your EDA. NIST promotes U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness. And then, of course, NOAA works to understand and predict changes in climate, weather, oceans, etc. The Economic Development Administration, which is EDA, and again, make sure you pay attention to the acronym list on these. They work to make grant investments that are well-defined and are linked to long-term sustainable economic development strategies. The next is the Department of Defense, and for those of you that submit DOD, you're very familiar with DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects. DARPA serves as the central research and development organization of the Department of Defense. And under that, you're going to have ONR, which that's where your Naval Research Lab is. And then you've got, they service the Navy and the Marine Corps. Then you have your Air Force Office of Scientific Research, the Army Research Office, Army Corps of Engineers, which most of you are probably familiar with, especially given the state of flooding we've had in the U.S. this year. And then, of course, your Army Medical Research and Material Command. So Department of Defense will announce their, so as you know, there are multiple interchangeable words for an opportunity. So RFA, RFP, BAA. So you're going to find DoD or the Department of Defense will announce their opportunities through a broad agency announcement. There's going to be three types of research: basic, applied, and then advanced technology. The basic research is systematic, study directed, and I'm trying not to read, but there's some information on these I wanted to make sure that I got correct for you. But the basic research is systematic, study directed toward greater knowledge or understanding of the fundamental aspects of phenomena and observable facts. And then applied research is a systematic study to understand the means to meet a recognized and specific need. And then, of course, your advanced technology includes development of subsystems and components, efforts to integrate subsystems and components into prototypes for field experiments. So just make sure you kind of read over those and the types of research that they offer. The Department of Education, they have three types of grant. You have discretionary, which is a competitive award process. You have the student loans or grants. Many of us are familiar with that. And then you have your formula grants, which are determined by Congress and they have no application process. EDGAR is the Department of Education's general administrative regulations that govern grants. So aside from uniform guidance, the Department of Ed also uses EDGAR. So and also remember for the Department of Education, they typically limit IDC to 8%. So most of you that submit those or training grants are quite familiar with that as well. So the next one is the Department of Energy. The mission of the Department of Energy is to ensure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges. They support fundamental research programs in basic energy sciences, biological and environmental sciences, and then, of course, computational science. They manage 10 national labs. The Office of Nuclear Energy Science and Technology develops new nuclear energy technologies. The Office of Fossil Energy and National Energy Technology Lab coordinates R&D solicitations, and their research is devoted to fossil energy research, including coal, natural gas, and oil. The National Renewable Energy Lab is managed by EERE, which is the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. They conduct research in the following areas, which is renewable electricity. So that would be solar, water, wind, and geothermal energy. The next list is just, the next slide is just a list of the national labs. So I don't know if any of that is going to be on the test, but you might familiarize yourself with some of those labs as well. Okay. The next executive departments are going to have study guides for themselves. And the Department of Health and Human Service, under DHHS, you're going to find NIH, FDA, HRSA, and then AHRQ. HRSA is the Agency for Health Research and Quality. Agency for Health Research and Quality. So you have your Agency for Health Research and Quality, and the primary research and development arm of the Department of Homeland Security, and they manage science and technology research. Under DHS, you're going to have FEMA, and then the U.S. Coast Guard. I do believe someone has said that those two questions could possibly pop up on the test. So just remember FEMA and U.S. Coast Guard. And then, of course, you have the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is HUD. Those are discretionary awards funded through certain initiatives. Under that includes like affordable housing, community and economic development, environmental engineering, fair housing, homelessness, rental assistance, etc. The Department of the Interior protects and manages the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. They provide scientific and other information about those resources. Some of the agencies under DOI include the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, Ocean Energy Management, Reclamation, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then, of course, U.S. Geological Survey. So the executive departments on this slide, I would suggest there's quite a lot of information, but just make sure that you're familiar with OSHA, DOJ, Department of State. The Department of Transportation, as you know, is made up of FAA, the Federal Highway Administration. Those are, again, we just don't know if those are going to be on the test, but those are important departments to kind of familiarize yourself with. And I would just definitely those on that slide, I would familiarize myself with. The Department of Veteran Affairs is different from research sponsored by other federal agencies. VA research is only focused on veteran needs. It is only VA employees can conduct research under their sponsorship, and typically researchers collaborate with academic institutions. So some of us do submit VA, but it's very localized, and there's not a lot of information. I would again reach out or do your research on that, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of VA on the test. But we also have independent agencies that will offer opportunities: EPA, NASA, the National Endowment for Arts and Humanities, NSF, USAID, which they've been in the news a lot, so I'm sure that you're all familiar with them. And then, of course, the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences. So the Office of Research and Development is the scientific research arm of EPA. Their mission is to protect human health and environment, and in large part by awarding funds to organizations to conduct environmental program and projects. They do awards every year in funding for assistance agreements to state and local governments, tribes, universities. So the National Endowment for the Arts, NEA, they fund research studies that investigate the value and or impact of the arts, either as individual components or they interact with and or with other domains of American life. They usually have matching option or matching requirements. 20 to 100,000 will be awarded. Grants can't exceed 50% of the total cost of the project. So make sure you keep that in mind. NEH. So NEH, which is the National Endowment for Humanities, is an independent federal agency that was created in 1965. It's one of the largest funders of humanities programs in the United States. They typically grant to cultural institutions such as museums, archives, libraries, colleges and universities, public TV and radio stations, and then to some individual scholars. USAID is the next one. It's the U.S. Agency for International Development. The majority of the funds are awarded competitively through contracts or grants and cooperative agreements. Their mission is in more than 80 countries, and they primarily work to improve agriculture, economic growth, the environment, human rights, women's empowerment, water and sanitation is a big one. So they do a lot of humanitarian awarding. NASA is the next one. In NASA, from my understanding, there could be potentially a lot of NASA questions. I know I've heard from those that have taken the CPRA that it was heavy on NASA and NIH. I'm not sure about the CRA, but I would make sure you familiarize yourself with the directorates for NASA. NASA has included grants and contracts and solicitation clauses telling everyone that proposers, this is an important thing to remember, and recipients may be ineligible for funding if their proposed work includes activities with China and or Chinese owned companies. So it's important to remember that they're not going to award or approve work that includes that. NASA, remember NASA starts with an N. This is kind of one of those elementary ways to remember, but Inspires is the system you're going to use to search for opportunities and to submit your NASA application. So Inspires starts with N, and then NASA starts with N. NASA uses the term for their opportunity or RFA is an NRA, which is a NASA research announcement, and it's used to uh, just like an RFP, RFA. The NRA provides for the submission of competitive project ideas conceived by the offers in one or more program areas of interest. NRAs may result in grants, contracts, or cooperative agreements. Oh, sorry, I missed that one. Okay, so one of the big opportunities that NASA, a lot of PIs are going to apply for are roses, and I know we just had a round of roses not too long ago. And just something to remember is, unlike an RFP containing a statement of work or specification, an NRA provides for the submission of competitive project ideas rather than a scope of work request. Oh, one other thing on NASA, I'm so sorry. They do have a proposer's guidebook. So for those of you that submit NIH or USDA, there's always an additional set of guidelines. So NASA has their own, which is their proposer's guidebook. And so make sure you just keep that in mind for additional sets of information. So for the Institute of Museum and Library Science, the mission is to advance, support, and empower museums, libraries, and related organizations through grant-making, research, and policy development. IMLS receives its funding through the annual appropriations process, so that's important to remember. Their spending limits each year are established in the Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act. I would definitely keep that act in mind because that could be a potential question. And then again, the mission of IMLS is to advance, support, and empower the museums, libraries, and related departments. And we also have selected nonprofits that we apply for. So the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, Chemical Society, Robert Wood Johnson is a big one, the Sloan Foundation, Fulbright Program, American Psychological Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and the National Academies. I think I've submitted to all of those except for Sloan and Fulbright. But those are, I'm not going to go over all of the information on those, but make sure you look those up. I think probably more than the information about the sponsor itself, they're just going to ask for some nonprofit. I did see a couple of questions in study questions that had asked about nonprofit solicitations. So I would familiarize yourself with those as well. So the next slide is going over SBIRs and STTRs. SBIR program is a United States government program coordinated by the Small Business Administration. SBIR, STTR programs are structured in 3 phases. Phase 1 determines the scientific, technical, and commercial merit and feasibility of ideas that are submitted. Phase 2, which is the project development to prototype phase, is the major research and development effort funding the prototyping and demonstration of most Phase 1 projects. And then Phase 3 is the ultimate goal, where work must be funded by sources outside of the SBIR STTR program. Their mission and goals is to stimulate technological innovation, meet federal research and development needs, foster and encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship by socially and economically disadvantaged persons, increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federal research and development funding. There's some important points to remember about eligibility for SBIR STTRs. A small business must be organized for profit with a place of business located in the United States. They have to more than 50% of the business, and it must be owned or controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent residents of the United States, or by other small business concerns that are each more than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals or citizens of the United States. And they also must not have no more than 500 employees. For STTR, nonprofit research institutions must be located in the U.S. and also meet the following criteria. They have to be a nonprofit college or university, a domestic nonprofit research organization, or a federally funded R&D center. So many of us will submit where we're a subrecipient to an organization applying to one of these. And so we would also have to meet the criteria of being in the United States. So there are 11 federal departments that are required to reserve a portion of their R&D funds for SBIR, and this slide has a list of those. I won't bore you with reading them all out, but you can review those And then for SBIR, I think this is a duplicate slide, but we went over the three phases. Phase one, which is the startup phase, they award up to between 50 and 250,000. NIH is 150. And then phase two, they generally award between 750 and a million. And then phase three, which there's usually no university involvement in the phase three. We're probably always going to be in one and two. And I think it's all universities on this training today, but we typically don't apply to phase three of it. There are 5 federal departments required to reserve portions of their R&D funds as well, and that's DoD, Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, NASA, and NSF. And they also do require IP agreements, which is on the next slide. We'll get with that. And one of the points that I wanted to make sure you kept in mind is that research and development budgets that exceed $1 billion are required to reserve 30% of their budget for STTR awards. So keep that in mind. Phase one and phase two, not less than 40% must be performed by the small business, and not less than 30% must be performed by single partnering research institutions like us. So those are some key points that I thought that you might want to keep in mind when you're studying for the SBI or STTR portion. And so how does the SBIR program differ from STTR? Principal investigators must have primary employment with the small business for an SBIR. And then for STTR, it does require a partnership, but they don't have to, and they have to perform 40% of the work, but they don't have, the STTR does not require the PI to be primarily employed by the SDC. That's pretty much all on the SBIR, STTR. The next section, John is going to take over. It's Uniform Guidance Pre-Award section to CFR 200.
So let me introduce myself. My name is John Wynn. I'm a research administrator at Texas A&M. We're going to be going over uniform guidance for the pre-award section on RFPs. So we're going to go over notice of funding opportunities, aka FOA, RFP, RFA, NEFA, the guidelines, the instructions. It will mostly be over compliance and adherence to sponsor guidelines. Usually, federal agencies will give us a minimum of 60 days from the RFP being posted to an RFP being due. Now, if you are a proposal administrator, you know that that is not always the case, or maybe sometimes a PI is a little late getting it, and that kind of turns into last minute proposals. But federal agencies can also decide to have at minimum 30 days of lead time, but the federal guideline is 30 days. Usually we have 60. This is for federal sponsors, so private sponsors do not have to follow this. In uniform guidance, an RFP or an RFA must have these 6 items that are on the slide: an agency name, title of the FOA, announcement type, initial or modification, the FOA number, assistance listing number, and key dates. A lot of this information can also be found on grants.gov. If you have one of them, you'll be able to usually find the others. Uniform guidance does have a specific required format for FOAs, which has a specific standard locations for information. Some of these sections are required and some of them are optional. We're going to be going over these sections. The sections in the FOA are the program description that comes first, and then the federal award information. The program description will be as long as needed to communicate to applicants the areas in which funding may be provided. It also describes the funding awarding agencies' priorities or technical focus in areas. And if you think about this, this is kind of a summary to help decide to a PI if this is even for them to apply to submit. So this is essentially a little bit before it comes to us as research administrators. Now, the federal award information is the nitty-gritty information. This is kind of where we come into play as Office of Sponsored Research and OSP. What we do here is we find information about the proposal, like how much the sponsor is going to award us, the ceilings, the floor for the budget, how many awards they're expecting to give out, and start dates of the periods of performance. This is the section where all of those nitty-gritty details are found after a PI decides that they are going to submit from the program description. Then we have the section C, which is eligibility. This is extremely important because after the PI decides that they want to submit and they see how much money that they are going to get, they need to see if they're eligible. Now, the eligibility has a lot of factors. Mainly what I would look for is if institutions of higher education are eligible to submit. Like Tammy said, if if most of us here are institutions of higher education, that's what we will be looking for there. There are other factors that may affect it, such as if your PI is a new investigator, and maybe only new investigators are allowed. And this isn't information that you would know. This is kind of something that they would have to read, as well as maybe only Hispanic serving institutions are allowed to submit. And you would have to find the information, the letter from Department of Education that you are considered a Hispanic serving institution to be able to submit. This section is also where cost sharing is going to be listed. It's going to tell you how much cost sharing, and I don't like the term cost sharing because it implies other things, but cost matching, cost sharing, participation, anything like that. If there is anything required by the sponsor, it will be listed here. And it needs to be listed by a certain percentage or amount or what contribution would be acceptable. So a lot of times there'll just be 25% of total direct cost or something like that. And this is where you'll also find where they'll say that indirect costs can also be put in as a cost share, or this is where they say only a part of it can be in kind, only a part of it can be salary. It needs to be materials or supplies, anything like that. Anything that is specific to cost sharing will be in this section if it is required. There is also limitations on proposal submissions. This is sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But in this section, the limited submit limitation on proposal submissions could be per organization, per PI, or limiting the PI by career, stage of career. And whenever I said previously, like a PI, a new PI, you wouldn't know that a PI is new because it may not be your job to know. But a PI applying and they're a new investigator, they should have 5 years from their degree to be able to apply, maybe 10. Not positive about that. Um, Now, most recently, if you have heard in the news, NIH had posted a notice saying that a PI may only submit 6 NIH proposals in a calendar year. That is just a notice that they submitted out. If we would, if you look in this section, this will usually be more along the lines of an organization is only allowed to submit one proposal, or a PI is only allowed to submit one proposal. If you are the organization, you might have a portal that you go through to have an internal competition for a limited submission. So there are more sections to the FOA or the RFP. There's these sections, which I won't have to read for you, but the application and submission information, this will be telling how to apply. Usually, most federal sponsors, with some exceptions, will go through grants.gov. And this will usually how this will be submitted. If it is grants.gov and your organization uses a system to system, which we will talk about later, you will also be able to use that as well. There's also content and form application submission. This is a required section, and it tells you the required content of the application and forms or formats that an applicant must use to submit it. when the deadline is, how the deadline is marked, and if they will be reviewing late submissions. Now, what this means is they will tell you the deadline, which we all know is good and well, but they will tell you if it is marked at submission whenever you press submit or whenever the agency receives it. And sometimes the PI wants to submit at 4:58. You're just going to have to let them know that this is marked whenever the agency submits it or receives it. So it may be late. And if it is late, if they will be reviewing late submissions and in what circumstances they might review a late submission. We also have application review information. This will provide the evaluation criteria. It'll state if cost sharing will be considered as the evaluation process. Now, I know that federal agencies should not be saying anything along the lines of, we will look on your proposal more favorably if you have cost share, but it is not required. They should not be saying that. But this is the place where they would say if cost share is part of the evaluation process. We also have federal award information. This may refer to a document or internet site where applicants can see terms and conditions. So if there are more instructions on the RFP than is listed, this might be the terms and conditions to the award. This might be even the Q&A, anything that is relevant to this RFP that is not listed on this RFP would be in this section, the federal award information. We also have section G, which is Federal Award Agency contacts. This is usually where you'll find the program officer information. Now, if you are a research administrator, you know that sometimes a PI will ask you some questions that you know your institution's rules. You don't know what they would say, or this is a very complicated question that maybe you don't have the answer to. This is the place where the program officer is usually found, where they'll help out with questions. If a PI wants to reach out, they can, and they'll be able to find contact info here. And then we'll have section H, which is other information. This is an optional section. This will require, this will include any additional information that will assist in submission. We have SAM, which is the System for Award Management. We must be registered with SAM before submitting an application. This is for all organizations, and SAM will provide a unique entity identifier in the application, and we must continue to maintain an active SAM registration. Now, SAM is essentially a consolidation of a lot of programs that we have. It is entity registration, online representations and certifications, exclusions, excluded parties list system, debarment and suspension, assistance listing, contract opportunities, wage determinations. It is a kind of mecca for just information for your organization. Now, some codes that you also need to register for prior to submission, which I'm sure that if you've read an RFP and you've done a couple proposals already, this is the section where you kind of look at and just glance at and say, yes, we have our SAM registration. Yes, we have our UEI. Yes, we have our cage code, TIN number, anything like that. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you also know what a DUNS number is. A DUNS number is a 9-digit number that is being phased out. It was the Data Universal Numbering System number. This is a 9-digit number that's being phased out by the UEI. The UEI is a unique entity identifier, which is a 12-character unique number assigned to all entities, public and private companies, individuals, organizations, or institutions that have to register to do business with the federal government. We also have the DLA cage code, which is the Defense Logistics Agency's cage code. This provides a standalone solution to search for foreign and domestic entities' cage information. And then we have our TIN, which you'll find on your W-9. It's a nine-digit number, which is either an employer identification number assigned by the IRS or it is a social security number. If you're working for an organization, it is usually an employer identification number. We will also talk about login.gov. It is a secure sign-in service used by the public to sign in to participating government agencies. Recently, I've seen a very large uptick in login.gov. It's essentially a single sign-on situation where you have a two-factor authentication to help you access a government agency website. Having this kind of eliminates the need for remembering multiple usernames and password by just having login.gov. Intergovernmental Review of Federal Programs, which issued with the desire to foster the intergovernmental partnership and strengthen federalism by relying on state and local processes for the coordination and review of proposed federal financial assistance and direct federal development. What this is the Executive Order 12372. A little hack that I do is just Control F on the RFP. If you do 123, you'll see that if this proposal is subject to intergovernmental review. In the state of Texas, specifically the state of Texas, we do not choose to review proposals, even if the executive order is saying that we should. That may be a different rule in whichever state that you are in. That is something that you'll have to look up and see. But with that, a state does not have to participate in this if they don't want to. We have types of funding announcements, like Tammy said, BAA, an FOA, RFP, RFQ. Most of these are kind of the same thing. We use these interchangeably. A request for proposal is usually associated with procurement and solicits proposals, as the name suggests. It's made through a bidding process by an agency or company interested in a procurement of commodity, service, or valuable asset, potential suppliers. Lots of these are where we will have, these are solicitations for proposals. This is where we get information so that we can start a proposal for our PIs. Types of funding applications, they're solicited and unsolicited. Unsolicited, of course, those kind of terms are in the name. Solicited is when a funding agency will ask for a proposal from the PI. An unsolicited proposal is something that the PI just submits, not solicited. There are different types of proposals, such as a new proposal. A new proposal is when PI is submitting for the first time or a proposal is being resubmitted after being declined, specifically, let's say NIH. If you are resubmitting a resubmission, that is now a new proposal because you can't resubmit twice. Each government agency kind of has its own rules. If you see that there are resubmissions allowed, if the PI tells you that this is a resubmission, it's a resubmission. Otherwise, it would most likely be new. A revision is something that modifies the proposal, but it hasn't changed or it hasn't come into our office just yet. And by our office, I mean any OSP Office of Sponsored Programs office. A revision is essentially you tell the sponsor, this is what I would like in your proposal, and then your PI either says, "Oh, I need to make a change," or something is happening, and the sponsor kind of reached out to me and said that we're not going to decline this yet, but you need to change the budget, change the scope of work, something like that. That is when a revision takes place. Now, a renewal is a situation where you apply and you're getting a competitively reviewed proposal that you're asking for extra money and extra time so that you can continue your work. So essentially renewing the proposal that you're already doing by having more money and more time. Now, The time and money portion is important because it kind of differentiates the next two situations. We have continuations. Continuations is more time, but not more money. We're just asking the sponsor to give us more time in addition to this proposal that we have already submitted. So a 5-year proposal becomes a 7-year proposal, but the money that you received, you already have. That is not extra money. Then we have supplemental, which is more money, but not more time. So this becomes, let's say you have a 5-year proposal and you only had $100,000. That was not enough money, so you're asking for more money. This is whenever you would submit a supplemental. Then we also have transfers. Transfers are whenever, so um, if you were new, maybe even if you're old, a transfer, you realize that the proposal doesn't come with the PI. It usually sticks with the institution, and the institution gets to decide if they are giving that PI the proposal to or project to take with them to another university. If they are, a transfer happens. And what happens in a transfer is the post-award admin will reach out to the pre-award admin at the next institution and initiate a transfer. This is essentially telling the federal agency that the PI is going from one institution to another institution, and the process administrative work needs to transfer over to the other institution. We have types of submissions, a letter of intent, a white paper, pre-proposal, a lot of things that I've Liliana, you're saying that I thought that supplements were additional funds that for activities outside the original scope of work. Let's go back. So a supplemental, from what I understand, are additional funds for the same scope of work. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that we have 100 years of research administration experience between us all. So if Lyndall or David, if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Not wrong. I think the keyword here is activities.
Mhm.
The scope the overall scope might not be changing, but you might need the additional funds for additional activities that were not originally captured. So I believe the scope is unchanging, but the
Mhm.
activities might be additional.
We're going to types of submissions. We have a letter of intent, a white paper, pre-proposal, and full proposal. Lots of the first three, letter of intent, white paper, pre-proposal, are kind of used interchangeably. A letter of intent, white paper, and pre-proposal are usually used interchangeably. A letter of intent is non-binding, and it's used to help program staff gauge the size and range of the competition. A lot of the times, a letter of intent is for the program officers to see how many people are going to apply and get them ready to have review boards, anything like that. This will have the PI's names, titles, list of participating organizations, and a synopsis of the work as well. A white paper pre-proposal, it's essentially the same, more or less work involved in each. Pre-proposal might require just a draft budget, anything like that. Just some more information that's needed prior to a full submission being a full proposal submission, which will require all documents, routing, anything like that. Thank you, Tammy, for answering that, but we'll go back to continuation because a no-cost extension is different than a continuation because I believe that a continuation you do have to apply for competitively. Is that true?
Not necessarily. I will say it depends. The continuations are often for already obligated funds. For example, going from year 2 to year 3 of a 5-year project that's been approved, but you have to submit projected funding for year 3. That would be a continuation, a non-competing continuation.
Mhm.
to move a project forward, but the funds are already obligated, as opposed to a no cost extension, which is additional time at the end of your project with no additional funding. I hope that helps clarify.
Yes, I it also helped clarify for me as well to kind of reiterate what Lyndall said. It's usually these are the situations where you have a let's say a 5-year proposal, but it's only a 5-year proposal for let's say 500,000, but you only need a budget for year one because they're only gonna give you year one at first, and then you have to show what you've done, can do the continuation proposal so that you can get year two of the proposal. But usually everything is the same. So we have steps for proposal development and submission. We do this as research administrators. We read through the RFP, which we tell the PIs to do, but we need to know when the deadline date is, and we need to know how much we can put in the budget so that we can develop it. If we have collaborators, we need to coordinate with the collaborators, subaward institutions, anything like that, so that we can get a statement of work, a budget, and an institutional endorsement, which is the minimum that we would need from a collaborator. For compliance, we need to make sure that everything is included to get this submitted and not rejected without review. That's probably an awful thing to happen, have all this hard work go in, and one of the administrative tasks fell through the cracks, and now the review committee won't review it. We'll also have the submission, which will reflect the institution and must be accurate and representative of the quality and reputation of the institution. A good way that a PI once told me this is we have to make sure that these proposals that we submit are good because one bad apple can ruin the bunch. If they see, let's say, Texas A&M didn't do well on this one submission. This is just awful. TPI did it last minute, threw it together, nobody checked it. It looks bad. Now they have a bad taste in their mouth. The fourth proposal that they see is another Texas A&M one. They're just already going to have a bias towards us. We have standard forms, which are SF424s, I'm sure that everyone's heard of. These are standard forms that are from OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. Um, these are forms that are standard and in all grant application packages, most grant application packages. They consist of a cover page, usually assurances or a budget form. If there is any lobbying forms, this is also where we will find SF424s. If you would like to find SF424 forms, just kind of Google SF424 grants.gov. It'll take you to a website with all the SF424 family information. Well, the standard proposal elements, these are just common or standard elements that each sponsor might have. This is not all inclusive, but usually you'll have a cover letter, which is the SF424, like I said, a title, which a PI should be able to tell you, abstract or project summary. This will just describe a little bit of what's happening. A table of contents, not necessarily each sponsor will need this, but it is very nice to have whenever there is a very long project narrative. Now, the project narrative or description might have a lot of sections. This could I've seen PIs submit, I would say, 120 pages of project narrative, and there's some that were as little as 5 pages. So, having a table of contents sometimes is nice. The RFP will also state what goes in the project narrative. It's usually best to follow what the RFP says to have, such as significance, innovation, and approach. Here are some more standard proposal elements, references, biosketch, current and pending. These are all, well, other than references, biosketches, current and pendings, those are all personnel documents. This is something that the PI will do. I think that most federal sponsors are now shifting towards science CV. So PIs will have to get acquainted with that. Budgets are something that my office help do. I'm not sure that everyone helps to do this, but we will help with the budget, budget justification, stuff like that. Facilities, equipments, other resources. Usually departments are kind of on top of that. I usually tell them if they don't really know what facilities, equipments they have, kind of ask their colleagues. This is just kind of going through what resources they have so that the sponsor knows that they are able to do this project. Then there's any supplementary documentation and appendices. Then we get to collaborators and subawards. These documents are needed from the sub recipient. Usually, it's a commitment from the institution. If your organization is part of FDP Clearinghouse, this could take form of a letter of intent from the FDP Clearinghouse. You're probably similar or familiar with how this looks. A statement of work, which is what they'll be doing, a budget at the very least, and whatever else is needed the from the sponsor. So at minimum, it will need to be the first three, the commitment from institution, statement of work, and budget. If the sponsor also requires a budget justification, IC rate agreement, fringe benefit documentation, bio sketches, current pending support, then you should also have those as well. Now we get to internal review and approval. This is where a lot of times it takes a while for things to do. This is for the protection of the institution and for the PI. What we have is specifically for Texas A&M, the PI will sign off and co-PIs will sign off. This is called routing in most places. Department heads will kind of look over their work and see what they're doing, see if it's relevant to what they're doing. Let's say if you had an engineer and they were doing a proposal, a research proposal for something that was in art and had no engineering involved, that would kind of be a red flag for the department head. There's deans as well that check this. Another thing is that, let's say the um, sponsor required cost share. If the PI decides that the department is putting up all of this money to match the cost share, to cost match the entire proposal, the department heads and deans need to approve this because sometimes, not all the time, sometimes they are not aware that the PIs just write this in. But having their approval will kind of have a cover for, well, the department head and dean approved this cost share. We also have the sponsored research office and VPR approve as well. Now, what is being approved? Like I said, proposed work is being approved. So mission of the institution, let's make sure that it's relevant to what they're doing. The budget, let's make sure the budget makes sense. And commitment of institutional match, like I said, cost share and verification of facilities and resources. Let's make sure that we're not lying about what we have here as well. F&A rate, usually universities and organizations will want to have their agreed upon rate. And if it is less than, they will want to approve that and have a reason why it is less than. If the sponsor is saying that you have to use 8%, that makes sense. If the PI is deciding I want to use 8%, it is more than likely going to have to be approved by a dean, a department head, vice president of research to get this rate. F&A, internal distribution, that's whenever IDC goes to the PI department, research offices, stuff like that, making sure there's no conflict of interest and compliance checks. Now, we can contact the sponsor or the sponsor may contact us after a submission. And the reason why they might contact us, let's say if it's NIH, it might be a just in time. A just in time is whenever the sponsor contacts us, doesn't really say that we are awarded. They say that we're looking at your proposal, we need more information. This is usually whenever the sponsor contacts us. And the just in time will just be an other support document or a current pending support. This will also come in forms of status checks, revised budgets. Sometimes a sponsor will say, you're asking for too much money for what you want to do. If you do a little bit less, maybe we can look at it a little bit better. Award negotiations, just doing things to make sure it doesn't take longer whenever the award gets here. There's also risk assessment of the applicant. The federal agency is going to look at whether the applicant is risky and if they have financial stability management systems and standards of the applicant. Reminder, the applicant is the organization most of the time. So they'll have the audit reports. This is the question where in a lot of federal forms, it'll ask if we are delinquent in any federal debt. They'll kind of make a decision on whether to continue to the next phase of awarding based on the applicant's list of items here. Now, the award comes in. The program officer reaches out and says, "Congratulations, PI, you are awarded," and CC's you, the Office of Sponsored Research office. And your options are to accept the award, and there might be other items in place that you need to do before you do this, but accept the award, just saying, yes, we did the correct thing. We're just going to accept everything. This is the money that we're going to get. Great. We can decline it, which does not usually happen, but can, depending on sometimes what we agreed to. One of the things I've seen things decline for is cost sharing that API did not tell their department and it did not get through routing. So this is why routing is very important. Then the other option is to negotiate. We'll have a team of negotiators talk to the sponsor and talk about the budget, see how we can change the budget because they aren't awarding us as much as we want to, or maybe because they aren't awarding us as much as we want to, have to change the scope of work. If there are terms and conditions, this is also where we're going to review it and see if there are there are any things that our organization cannot agree to as well. We have ERA, which is the Electronic Research Administration. This is essentially all the portals that we would use to kind of see things with research administration that we use on a daily basis. ERA Commons is very common. It's an administration portal for grants for NIH specifically. We have eVerify.gov, FedConnect, grants.gov, where a lot of funding opportunities will be available. iEdison, USA Spending.gov, and federalreporting.gov. This is a continuation of the list. We have Grant Solutions with over 17 partners, NIH Reporter, NSF Research.gov, Inspires, G6, which is previously G5 for the Department of Education, EasyFed Grants, and EBRAP, which is used for Department of Defense. Continuing on, we have PAMS for Department of Energy, ERE, Report, ND Grants, Just Grants, Grants Online, SAMS Domestic for different federal agencies. Research.gov is for NSF. This is the modernization of Fastlane. If you were here for a while, you remember Fastlane. Research.gov, I think is better, but I grew up with it. So um, this is where you can submit a proposal, check the application status, upload project reports, view project outcomes, report for the general public, submit and manage payment transactions. NIH is the other big dog. We have ERA Commons for NIH. This is where we'll submit. NIH is ERA Commons. Very usually, we will our institution will submit from a system to system called Cayuse, which again I think is the last slide. So NIH proposals will usually go through ERA Commons to be submitted. and it will give a status of information on submitted applications. Now, I say go through ERA Commons to be submitted. I mean, grants.gov is where you submit. ERA Commons is where you are going to see the status of the submission. If you would like to withdraw the submission for any reason or revise your submission, ERA Commons is where you would go, but grants.gov or a system-to-system solution is what you would use to submit. Assist is also for NIH. This isn't as popular as grants.gov. However, there are system, some institutions, agencies that require Assist to be submitted for an NIH proposal. These are things that you're able to do on Assist. We then have Proposal Central. For Proposal Central, I mostly see it for nonprofits and private grant making organizations, but there are some government funding organizations that use this. This is used by American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, Arthritis Foundation, Muscular Dystrophy Associations. A lot of nonprofits will use this site because it's essentially an easier, more centralized website to do all of this. Then what I've been talking about, a system to system, usually a system to system is essentially a go-between so that we have one system to do things. Because if you've ever worked in a grants.gov workspace, which I have, it's a little clunky and it doesn't work very well. But we use Cayuse over at Texas A&M and highly recommend. There's a lot of items where it'll just autofill, and these are things that your institution can work on in the system to system rather than having you input every single thing manually in grants.gov. So they have the advantages such as real-time error checking as well, whereas grants.gov will not have that. And I think that's it for my portion.